Welcome to our final project on stereotype threat in athletics, how skin color can affect performance, by Emma Twer, Madison Crick, Eric Collins, Bo Ressler, and Justin Dunn.
There should not be pre-existing judgment about athletic ability based on the color of your skin. When an athlete is faced with a task framed as a negative racial stereotype, they are more likely to experience a decrease in performance. This is important because skin color does not determine anything about a person. Everyone is the same on the inside, so the color of someone's skin should not be a factor in how they play.
Throughout history, sports have been one of the world's largest influences. While segregation and racism was still very prevalent in our country, sports were mainly played by whites, and whites were thought to be superior to all other races. Once segregation was eliminated, black people were allowed to participate in certain sports, but they were still very rare and didn't have as many opportunities as the white people did. A lot of this changed when Jesse Owens broke many records and won multiple gold medals in Berlin, Germany, during Adolf Hitler's reign of control. Hitler wanted the Olympics to be in Berlin to show people how the Aryan race was superior, but Owen proved him to be very wrong. Black people were further integrated into sports when Jackie Robinson became the first Major League Baseball player and shocked the world by being one of the greatest players ever. Sports have continued to be integrated over time, with many of the greatest athletes ever being black. This has put many athletes in a position to influence their societies with their fame.
In society, we make certain assumptions about people based on their skin color, whether we like to admit it or not. The textbook on page 90 states that if we ask people to brainstorm media images of black men in society, chances are stereotypes would revolve around criminal activities such as drug dealers or athletic ability such as football or basketball players. The thing about it is most people would think that it's okay to say something like, he's black, of course he is a good athlete. But that is called a double-edged stereotype. Page 86 of the textbook explains how double-edged stereotypes relate to ideas such as people of Asian descent being good at math, African American males being strong athletes, etc. Although these seem harmless, they can be very offensive and they are still wrong to say.
If you sit back and think about it, sports can be divided into two categories, black-dominated sports and white-dominated sports. We can then pose the question, why is this? You can see African Americans thrive in sports such as football, basketball, and track, but then lack in representation in sports like baseball, golf, and tennis. In 1970, Jeff Stone researched the effects of language in an athletic task. When dealing with black participants, Stone found that asking them to complete a skill based on sports intelligence negatively affected their performance. Likewise, when dealing with white participants, Stone found that asking them to complete a skill based on natural athletic ability hindered their performance. These results can allude that if a task is presented as requiring intelligence, white participants are more likely to succeed because of their stereotype is that they are naturally smarter than African Americans. However, if a task is presented as requiring natural athletic ability, black participants are more likely to succeed based on their stereotype of being a naturally talented athlete.
For some reason, the way a task is worded to athletes can impact the way they perform in a negative way. It can be considered stereotype threat since it makes athletes believe they cannot excel in one way and ends up harming their performance. This subconscious awareness of stereotype threat creates both short and long-term effects on the athletes. Baker and Horton believe the short-term effects on athletes are mostly stress and anxiety and hurting their athletic performance. Being a professional athlete in an environment that's proven to hinder their performance has its cons. Impacts in the long run can even come to an athlete dropping out of their sport since they don't feel good enough. Because of this stereotype threat, it not only changes the way people play, but it discourages some from trying to play certain sports that are bound to go against them.
In this experiment, the researchers wanted to find out if relating performance in sports to natural ability would relate to a decline in practice of that sport. They also wanted to observe if the white participants would try to deny the stereotype that white people aren't as athletic as other races. They conducted 2 experiments to test this. In the first experiment, they had 28 males and 36 females who were all identifying as white. They had the participants play certain sports and analyze their performance. They conducted They concluded that once they had told the participants that their skills in the sports were strictly based off of natural ability, the participants started to practice less. In the second experiment, they did the same procedure as they did in the first, but with 38 Hispanic and 36 white men and women. The results showed that the white participants practiced less than the Hispanic participants in order to try to prove that they could perform the sport off of natural ability in order to prove that whites are as athletic as other races.
Considering how your racial identity can affect your athletic performance, the same result can be applied to the STEM field. If a task or skill within the field is presented as a natural ability, African Americans will most likely perform better, whereas if a task is framed around intelligence, Americans are more likely to exceed. Racial identity, as when it comes to sport and athletic performance, is very related to STEM. As far as athletic performance, it is to be found that African American athletes tend to be more athletic than white athletes. According to the article, the NFL's racial divide in one chart, 70% of the NFL players are African Americans, while the other 30% are white. But when it comes to actual jobs in the NFL, such as coaches and general managers, it is totally opposite, with more than 75% of them being white, and that is how this relates to STEM. In the real world, when it comes to big companies, you mostly see white men as boss, but not too many African Americans. As stated in the textbook on page 99, African Americans are seen as criminals, game breakers, drug dealers, ball players, and much more. They are rarely looked at as business people or company owners.
I think we first have to target the entire team, not just the players, but the coaches and the families that revolve around the team. Everyone wants to push harder on the athletes, but we have to make them feel comfortable from the beginning. They need to get a confidence in their skill and then teach them that it isn't because of where they are from that they get the skill, but it's just who they are. Also, that having a good GPA isn't what makes you do better in sports. It really is just who you are and how hard you try for it. Making sure that we teach them that it's their practice that makes them good will help prevent this gap. Another way to fix this is not to push players so hard. Yes, we have to push them, but with practicing, not by name calling. Coaches will be the ones who need to fix this mostly. If coaches start to compare players to each other by saying white guys can't jump as high as black guys, then it can put players at risk. Coaches need to learn what they should and shouldn't say and learn what the impacts are if they do end up saying it. If you can take away the stereotype of one race being better than others, then it will lower the stereotype then. Finding the right role models is what we really need. They can lessen the impact of stereotypes and inspire everyone to make this judgment disappear.
The biggest problems with breaking the race barrier in certain sports is access and affordability of youth sports. If you look at sports like hockey, lacrosse, tennis, and volleyball, they are mostly dominated by white people and are usually played in more high-income areas. A big reason for this accessibility problem is if you look at poverty rates in America, it's almost 38% for young African American kids compared to the 22% of white kids. So when you talk about kids being accessible to sports, it may cost more money or you're less likely to find closer to poor neighborhoods. And you see the problem at hand. If you look at basketball, football, or baseball fields, you are more likely to find them in low-income areas, and they have cheaper equipment costs, which proves why we see more diversity in these sports than sports such as golf, volleyball, tennis, soccer.
Thanks for watching.